This week on Dance of Joy, we talk about floral floors and walls, Larry's freestyle flows, and flossing for confidence, not the dance. All that and more as we watch Season 3, Episode 20 of our favorite 80s hit sitcom, Perfect Strangers. Hello and welcome to Dance of Joy, a Perfect Strangers rewatch podcast. We are back with you yet again for more hilarity. My name is Sophia. I'm one of your co-hosts, and joining me as always is my brother and my co-host. What's up, Imran?
Hi, I'm Imran and I'm exhausted. Let me tell you why. I found one of those Chinese finger trap toys. You know those where you stick your finger in.
Yeah.
And the harder you pull, the harder it is to take off. Well,
Right.
It took me about 7 hours to realize, I just have to relax.
Oh, no.
That was, you know what? And it makes it really hard to use the bathroom when you have your hands in the Chinese finger traps. I'll tell you that.
You were pulling on that finger trap for 7 hours?
Yes. On the plus side, my triceps are huge now.
That's your workout for today.
Good resistance training.
That equals 20,000 steps.
Finger trap toy. Why do they make these things for kids? Anyways, hi. How's it going?
It's going well, and that is very appropriate for today's episode of Perfect Strangers, which is Season 3, Episode 20, which was called The Defiant Guys.
Yeah, this is an interesting title. And before we dig into that, let's just read the TV Guide description first, because this title, I didn't understand this title until the end of the episode. So I think this makes more sense. In the TV Guide, if you cracked it open, it says Larry has a luncheon date with a publisher that could make or break his career. But minutes before the meeting, Larry and Balky become handcuffed together, right? Great setup plot. You know, you got a sitcom plot. And I didn't, for the whole episode, I'm like, what does this title mean?
Right, because if you Google Defiant Guys, you won't find much. That's because it is a reference, but it's not a direct reference. It is a reference to the 1958 classic film, The Defiant Ones. So they changed ones to guys.
Uh-huh.
And in The Defiant Ones, we have Tony Curtis and Sidney Poitier playing two escaped convicts who are chained together and have to learn to get along to avoid being captured.
Okay, now it makes a lot more sense.
So there is clearly, and we get another reference to this later on.
Yeah, this is
almost to
interesting.
the end of the episode.
We'll talk about that. Yeah, when it comes up, because the whole time I'm like, what is this? What is this title? But
there it is.
Classic film, and of course, this episode, the show starring Bronson Pinchot as Balky and Mark Lynn-Baker as Larry Appleton.
That's correct. And we have quite a hefty guest cast, a bunch of different parts in this, some with small parts, some with larger. But the guest cast includes our favorite Harriet Winslow, played by Jo Marie Payton France. This time without Lydia. There's no Lydia in this episode. But we also have a character called Mrs. Van Wisser, who's played by a very prolific and popular actor who was everywhere in those for many, many years, named Susan French.
Veteran actor Susan French, yes.
Veteran actor Susan French. We have a man named Milt Jamin, who plays this French maitre d' at this fancy French restaurant. And we have someone we've seen before, Jimmy the security guard. Remember when they were out on the ledge?
Oh, absolutely. Jim the security guard. His name is Jim Dugan.
Jim Dugan.
Jimmy the security guard.
And we have the publisher of the paper, as well as Larry's direct boss. His direct boss is Mr. Burns, Harry Burns, played by Eugene Roche. And then the publisher, whose character name is R.T. Wainwright, played by a man named F.J. O'Neill.
I think, is this the first time we actually see Mr. Wainwright?
I believe so, yeah. We've heard about him, I think, before, and here we see him.
This episode first aired, according to TV Guide, in our Hulu order, March 11th, 1988. Now, a little bit of discrepancy. I may have to change what I said previously.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Pipe Dreams was the first episode to shift from Wednesday to Friday. The last episode aired March 9th, and this one is March 11th. So this is a Friday. This may be the first Friday episode late in season 3, setting up TGIF. But in this week in March, you would have had 2 brand new episodes of Perfect Strangers in like a few days' time.
In the same week, so Wednesday and Friday. Yeah, that was an exciting week. And I know everybody who's listening to this show thinks that we are amazing and have all the facts all the time, but we do make mistakes every now and then. We take it back. This might have been the first Friday episode of Perfect Strangers. All right, let's get into this. We have Act 1, and we're at the apartment, and it's morning time, and Larry is bustling about in a rush. He's dressed for work already. He walks out from the bathroom area, and he's all bothered. He says, Balky, do we have any dental floss? And he's rushing around like he's late for work. And Balky's still in his pajamas, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And he's at the little kitchen counter eating cereal in his pajamas. And so Larry's bothered. He's like, do we have any dental floss left? And then we get the opening joke is like, I consider this like a classic gag joke from like from that era.
Yeah.
We don't hear this that much anymore. But Balky has some dental floss tied around his finger. And he says, oh, I tied the last of it around my finger to remind me to buy dental floss. And so that to me is like an old, like it used to be in the joke books, like this gag, this idea of like tying something around your finger to remind you to do something.
I never
and then
understood
you forget.
that.
Yeah, I never understood the premise of that either, but I feel like when we were kids, that joke was around a lot. And then you're like, oh, but I forgot what I tied it.
That joke was around, but I don't understand the concept of tying something, a string around your finger to remind you of something, because how do you remember what it's supposed to remind you of?
Exactly. Well, we have a lot of digital gadgets now to remind us about everything. There's no more dental floss, basically, because he's got the last bit tied around his finger. Then Larry has this line that I thought was really great. He says, oh, great. Just when I could really use the confidence a good flossing gives me. And he's walking around. And I love that line because I floss a lot. I am like a flossing addict.
Yeah.
I know what like if I cannot feel the air passing through my teeth, I can't like sleep easily at night. You know, I have to I need to feel the wind between my teeth.
That's good dental hygiene. That's all that is.
But here's the thing. So they've run out, and immediately this strikes me as not really believable that he's into flossing that much, because if you are a flossing addict, everybody knows you have multiple flosses all around the house. You have one in your purse, you have one in your car, you have one in every room. You wouldn't run out.
Yeah, you get obsessive about it. You'd have a case of those things stashed everywhere.
And the minute you run out, it's like absolutely the first thing. You have to go out right then and get more.
So I was confused why Balky wasn't dressed and Larry is dressed, but Larry quickly explains he's going to work early because he has a lot of work to do. And Mr. Burns, his boss, is taking him to lunch today.
Oh, that's a big deal.
That is huge.
That's why he's so nervous.
He considers this could be the most important lunch of his life. We have heard this phrase many times from Larry Appleton.
Everything is the most important thing of his life, the most important photo competition, the most important date of the rest of his life. So here we get classic Larry. We're back to classic Larry. This could be the most important lunch of my life.
Mr. Burns taking him to lunch, and he needs all his lucky things. And he's like, I've got my lucky tie, my lucky socks. He can't find his lucky pen. He needs his lucky pen.
And he says, Balky, have you seen my lucky pen? And Balky just says, many times, cousin. Also a nice little gag joke.
Oh, sure.
But I look at it again if you want.
That's like when you're like, have you seen this guy? And you're like, oh, yeah, he's about 5'7", he's got dark hair, brown eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
The guy's like, no, I mean, have you seen him recently?
Classic joke. Here's something to note of this show. On the one hand, we sometimes have really clever, brilliant wordplay that like just tickles us and stays with us. And on the other hand, we also have these like just classic gags and cliche jokes that are still funny though.
Yes.
You know?
So, well, some are standards. The standards, like jazz standards, rock standards, are always going to play if you.
They're classics.
If you do well.
That's why they're called classics. Yeah. Oldie but a goodie. So anyway, he finds his lucky pen on the coffee table on a notebook, and that's when Balky remembers. Oh, Popo, I forgot. I use it to write a letter to Mama. And at this point, Balky has stood up from the high stool he's sitting at in the kitchen and like walked around into the living room, and we get a full shot of him in his onesie pajamas. I think we've seen these pajamas before.
Yes, we have, but describe them again.
All wool colored with like a little bit of colorful
trim down the middle,
embroidery
around
on the collars.
And what else?
First thing to note is that this episode was most likely filmed earlier in the season because we are back to super skinny Balky the way he was at the beginning of this season. And also his hair is the same as it was in the beginning, which is a little bit different than it was in the end. It's like straighter and his face is super skinny and long. But I'm not the only one who noticed something about these pajamas once we see the full body view after he stands up. A lot of our listeners in the group pointed this out. The pajamas are a bit, shall we say, snug, a bit, shall we say, revealing in...
Quite revealing, maybe a little... Nobody caught this. Nobody thought this might be a problem with the lighting.
This is a family-friendly show. Maybe I guess it passed the censors. No one thought anything of it.
Is it camera trick?
But there were some shadows involved, etc. Some tenting, I might say.
Good morning, Balky.
Good morning, Balky. Only innuendo on this, our family
What are we talking about?
Exactly, our family-friendly podcast. So, back to the scene. He has used his pen to write a letter to Mama, and then we have a little joke that I think is kind of like extraneous off to the side, but it gets a little laugh, so it serves a purpose. Balky picks up this notepad. There's a big blotch of ink right in the middle. And he says, cousin, did you know that if you shake the fountain pen so that a big glob of ink come on the paper, then you stick the tip of your pen in the glob and it will suck the ink. He like inhales on the suck the ink right back. I can't even do that way. It will suck the ink right back up inside itself. He says, I show you. And then Larry stops him. He's like, Larry's pissed. He's just like slightly annoyed right now. First of all, there's no floss. Secondly, he's like, you used my pen. And he goes and gives him a bunch of other pens. He says, if you want to write a letter to Mama, here are pens. Use any of them. Do not use my lucky pen. And Balky's like, well, excuse me for being a good son. So we're building up Larry's annoyance. That's what this whole scene is doing. First, he's like flustered. He's late. It's the most important lunch of his life.
And then Balky stops to explain how a fountain pen works to the audience.
Yes. And basically, he's like, whatever. Here are pens to write your mama. Give me back my lucky pen.
So then Larry now needs his keys, and he can't find his keys. He's, where are my keys? And Balky does have a funny line here. He goes, do you mean your regular keys or your lucky keys? Being all smarty pants. But Balky explains he knows where Larry's keys are.
Specifically his car keys. He's looking for his car keys that he can't find.
They're with Jennifer because Balky has loaded Jennifer Larry's car. She needed to get to the airport. He thought he was helping out. And Larry is not happy.
Now he's
with
like
this
elevated
news.
to fully pissed at Balky. And he's like, you loaned Jennifer my car? And Balky thinks nothing of it. Balky's like, she needed a car. I gave her the car. And he says, yes, she was very grateful. She gave me a hug. A big one.
Remember, he has better chemistry with Jennifer.
Yes,
than
this
Larry.
is a leading theory.
He's got a big hug. And then Larry just getting personal. He goes, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe you're doing this to me.
Yeesh,
and I was
Larry,
like, wow,
settle down.
What is he doing to you, Larry? This is all in your head right now.
Settle down. Okay, I want to pause right here because there's a little, what did we call this before? Editing in continuity?
Continuity error.
Continuity error. A little blip in the editing. It's very fast. You have to actually like go back to catch it, I think. In this scene where they're like around the kitchen counter and having this dialogue exchange, there's one point where Balky, who had been eating a bowl of cereal there, picks up the cereal bowl as if he's about to take it to the sink or something. And then like magically in a moment, it's like a quick cut in the editing and the cereal bowl is gone.
It's a cut to the other camera that's covering the same shot. So it looks like he does a David Copperfield magic trick and it just
snaps his fingers and it just goes down.
Disappears into thin air. I was like, oh, look at that. He should be on America's Got Talent. He's really good at making things disappear.
And it reminded me of the old videos you and I used to make when we were kids and bored at home in the summer. We used to make these magic videos, right? Like magic tricks and full of like terrible editing on a huge, like shoulder held VHS video camera. And I remember you doing all the filming and the directing and I was in it and I would be like, now it's here. And I would snap my finger and we would cut and now it's gone.
Yes. And I think we made like a like an ice cooler move around the living room by itself.
Something like that. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. We did that too.
It was so bad.
I would disappear myself by snapping and then snap and come back on, and we would just stop the video and start again.
Remedial.
That reminded me of
special
these videos.
Effects. Yes,
we ought to find these and offer them as extra bonus content to our subscribers.
If you donate enough to the Buy Me a Coffee, maybe you get to watch these horrible videos. You can see
Child Imran and Child Sophia
quite
making
embarrassing.
homemade magic videos.
It's going to cost a certain amount of coin to get us up for these.
All right, back in the scene. So Larry is pissed and frustrated with Balki. And Balki, here we get his first Balki-ism of this episode. He says, cousin, correct me if I'm wrong, but I have a stinking feeling. Are you angry with me? And of course, he means a sinking feeling.
I have a stinking feeling.
But I think stinking feeling also conveys the same
also work
emotion. Yeah.
Yes, for the context. And Larry's like, yes, I am angry. Just point blank tells him, he goes, yes, because of you, I can't floss. I've wasted time looking for my lucky pen, and now I have to leave the bus, which leaves in 5 minutes.
Okay, he says because of Balki. First of all, we've already established that, like, if you are a dedicated flosser, it is your own fault that you only have one floss and that you let yourself run out.
The pen was just sitting on the table, and Balki just, the car thing, okay, maybe it's a little inconvenient, Larry, but calm down. Jeez.
Calm down. Take a taxi, take the bus, whatever. Also, like, I get it. What?
They didn't have Ubers, unfortunately.
They didn't have Ubers, but, like, they had taxis, right? And if I get it, that kind of transportation is expensive. Believe me, I get it. I try to take buses and trains too. But if it's a big day and a special event, you will splurge a little on that taxi to get there on time. You know, it's okay.
Well, but he wasn't planning on. He's like, I'm driving. I got a car. I'm going early, and then that makes it a little inconvenient.
But for the sake of comedy and setting up a premise,
Balki
we will accept it.
Balki needs to. He can't let this go. If Larry's angry, they have to talk about it. And that's what he says. He goes, I'm sorry I ruined your day. We have to talk about it. And Larry's just being so mean, and he continues to be mean. He goes, Balki, I need to get to work. I don't want to talk to you. And just and grabs
really mean to Balki.
Yes. And then he grabs his briefcase and coat, and Balki follows him, talking to him the whole time, but Larry is not listening.
Balki the whole time is like, but we could talk about it on the way to work. Just wait for me to get dressed, or we could talk about it when we get there, or whatever. And Larry's just ignoring him, and he like leaves out the door, closes it, while Balki's still trying to plead with him to get him to talk. And the last, he leaves the door closed. Balki's inside the apartment and alone. He says, or you could pick a time.
Man, Larry just walked out of him while he was still talking.
And that is, I think that's the end of Act 1. It's a super short Act 1. There were 4 blackouts in this episode. So this is the end of Act 1 or.
Super short Act 1. You're right.
Super short Act 1. We set up the main conflict. Larry is mad at Balki. And Balki doesn't want him to be mad at him. That's the main conflict.
We talked about a continuity error, but we also got to talk about an Easter egg in the beginning.
Yes.
Balki is eating cereal, and it's not Raisin Poofs. It's sugar oatsies. Yeah. If you remember back in that episode, taking stock, where he bought stock in the unicorn company that made Raisin Poofs, they also made sugar oatsies. And I think you could see a logo on the box that says unicorn logo.
That's correct.
That's great.
So
I love
they are
that.
big. So Balki probably still has stock in unicorn.
I wonder how his stock is doing.
And he's still a big supporter and a loyal eater of unicorn cereal products.
Also, are they still taking karate class? I still think about that.
Are there still 100 raisins in every box of Raisin Poofs?
No, they changed the tagline after.
They took it off. Okay.
No, I don't know. Anyways, before we get to Act 2, listener, you want to meet other devoted fans of Perfect Strangers? Well, I bet you didn't think that there's a place where all the diehard fans of Perfect Strangers hang out. There is. It's our Facebook group. Join it today. There's a link in the show notes, and everyone is welcome and everyone is cool. You will meet other listeners, and I post a thread every week on the episode we're recording, so you can leave your thoughts and comments, and we will throw them in at the end of the show. And you're part of the show just like that.
Yeah, and sometimes there are some very deep dives about some parts of episodes, one of which we'll talk about later later on today. But you can be part of those conversations and put forth your theories on why these characters are doing certain things. Moving on, let's go to Act 2. So super short Act 1. We've established the conflict. Act 2 it's later that morning. We are now at the Chicago Chronicle basement where our two cousins work. And Balky is at his mail sorting table. He's doing his job, sorting the mail. And then we have this elderly woman coming down the stairs, and she's very mean, and she's like very like hoity, right? Like
snooty. She's got a snooty accent.
elderly woman, and she says, "You mail boy."
Mail boy.
She calls him you and mail boy. And Balky is, sweet and polite, of course. He's like, "Oh, hello, Mrs. Van Wisser." So we learn her name.
It's Susan French.
Having a nice day, and she is just mad. She's upset. She says she's not having a nice day, and then Balky's like, "You know something? I'm not either." So no one's having a nice day, and he starts talking to her because he takes it as an opening in the conversation. He says, "Cousin Larry got up this morning with a look on his face that would have curdled your hair."
Is that a saying? What's the saying?
So I think a sour look
curled your hair.
No, you have the saying a sour look, right? And sour milk, a look so sour it would curdle your milk, perhaps, was a thing.
Okay, yes, sour look on the face.
That is maybe mixed with something about hair that doesn't quite come to mind, but that's my best guess.
Okay.
Another phrase about
it's a mangled phrase.
Make your hair stand on. I don't know. That's frightening. A look on his face, but I take it to mean it's a sour look, and he meant to say curdled your milk.
Okay.
And Mrs. Van Wisser doesn't care about any of this. In fact, she very rudely says, "Spare me the details of your petty little life."
Yeah,
Yikes.
You got to do her voice. Her voice is kind of funny.
Please spare me the details of your petty little life. It's that classic, like, hoity old lady affect that is in all the shows, like Emily Gilmore, And she's complaining. She's got a bone to pick with Balky. She says there were 20 messages from a Mrs. Porterfield on her desk, and didn't Balky mail her RSVP to Mrs. Porterfield's daughter's wedding? To me, already this little exchange feels so random.
Did you mail my RSVP to her daughter's wedding?
And Balky says, "Of course he did." And she says, "Thank goodness we wouldn't want the most important society editor in town to miss it."
That's who Van Wisser is. Got it.
Establishing her background. And Balky says, "Well, of course we wouldn't. Don't be ridiculous." And then, of course, he goes, "Who's that?" He has no idea what she's talking about. And now here, the next bit is funny and smart and clever. And I wonder if that was the whole reason to introduce this Mrs. Van Wisser character. And so Balky says, "Who's that? Who's the most important society editor in town?" And she says, "Me, you cretin."
She calls him a cretin.
A cretin.
Yeah. And what is his response?
"Oh, Papa, I'm not a cretin, I'm a mepiot. But we're often mistaken for cretins because there's a certain similarity in the bone structure and long tapering face and somewhat lugubrious nose." And he keeps talking and talking.
I love when he goes, "somewhat lugubrious nose."
Lugubrious
that's
nose.
A great name.
Now, before we get back into the scene, I want to talk about this wordplay, which I think is so clever. So she calls him a cretin, Cretin, which is most commonly used as a derogatory slang term for a stupid, vulgar, or insensitive person. Cretin. Now, one of the, if not the largest island in Greece is an island called Crete.
Right.
And people from Crete are called Cretans, Cretan.
Cretans.
Okay. S. Cretans. Yeah. So, but it sounds the same. Cretan. Now, so they're playing with this Cretan, two different spellings, two different meanings of the word Cretan. Now, there's also a myth about the origin of the derogatory word Cretan, where people thought it originated with residents of Crete, the Greek island, and it was used to demean them, but that is in fact not true according to some analysis on the internets. The alternate explanation is that Cretan, Cretin, is the French word chrétien, which means Christian in French. And the explanation is that in the alpine valleys of French Switzerland, where iodine deficiencies were once common, women gave birth to an unusually high proportion of mentally or physically retarded children.
Oh.
And out of kindness, these unfortunate offspring were called chrétiens, Cretans, a French
chrétien.
dialect term for Christians to indicate that they were still human beings and not someone lesser than. So, in fact, it was a term that started out of kindness that I guess later
became
as many words do. They start one way and they become appropriated by derogatory usage. So that's a little dive into this Cretan wordplay.
Well, I mean, we just talked about the word tramp like that,
right?
You know, in the last episode recently. This happened, a lot longer ago, but this continues to happen in language. It's interesting.
Yeah. Language is fluid.
Yes.
Okay, so back into the scene. She's like, calls him a Cretan, and he's like, oh, I'm not a Cretan, I'm a Mepiat, but we do get confused because this, that, and the other, blah, blah, blah. He's talking. She cuts him off and says, who cares? As long as you mailed the RSVP. And Balki assures her that he mailed it, and he also included that little note of hers.
Oh.
And she stops and says, what little note?
There's a note?
And he says, the note that you clipped on the outside of the envelope that says, and then he recites from memory. Here, suddenly his pornographic memory is back.
He can remember this, not the publisher of the history book. Yeah.
Right. He can remember the little sticky note, and he says from memory, I wouldn't miss this marriage for the world. It must have cost the old bag a bundle to marry off her daughter. Remind me to send a sympathy card to the groom.
Oh, she's rough. Oh, Van Weiser, you are mean.
But Balki is pleased with himself for remembering, and he says, now, you find a Cretan who can remember that.
That's got a point there.
And here is he saying Cretan I-N or Cretan A-N? Who knows? But it's a funny wordplay.
And Van Weiser is like, you sent that note to Mrs. Porterfield? And Balki's like, oh, you don't have to thank me now. It's just part of my job. And she's like, that was a note to my secretary. And Balki corrects her mistake. He's like, oh, that's where you made your mistake. You want to send something to your secretary, use an inter-office envelope. That way you save 22 cents. And she is all mad, and she's like, you're going to pay for this. And Bucky's like, well, okay, this time. But next time, you buy your own stamps.
Yeah, he doesn't even understand that she's, like, mad at him, and he's taking it all as a compliment. He's like, sure, no problem, I'll take 22 cents.
The Gorpley effect. He can't, he doesn't get the threats.
And she storms off into the parking garage. And again, I'll say it, we'll talk about this a little bit later. I found this whole thing
pretty random.
Pretty random. It does set us up for some funny lines about Cretans and Mepiats.
And it comes up later for a reason.
But it doesn't seem entirely necessary to move this story along.
Kind of unnecessary, yes. Van Weiser is.
So she storms off toward the parking garage. And as we see her go out, the elevator opens and a bunch of people get out, including Larry and Harriet. And Balki's like, oh, cousin Larry's here. We can talk now. But Larry's giving him the cold shoulder.
Oh,
he's still so mad at him. He's not even talking to him. Larry's just shuffling about the room to the file cabinet, to his desk. And Balki's just following him around. And he finally grabs Larry and he begs him to talk to him. He's like, stand still, talk to me. And Larry just looks at him. He says, Balki, I'm having a bad day. And we find out more about how his day went wrong already this morning. He says he got pushed off the bus at the wrong stop. His lucky pen leaked. Oh, no. And he's late getting his article up to the city desk, at which point he pulls out the paper from his typewriter and it tears in half.
Oh, no. Also,
so it's a bad day getting worse.
How did Balki get to work before Larry did when he left way? Why don't they just come together?
We don't know that he's just getting to work. He could have been there running around the building and,
Why? I thought they go to work together. They work in the same place.
He went earlier. He's just coming from the elevator from upstairs.
Oh, okay. He was there before.
Yeah. He didn't come from the garage.
I love this next bit because Balki's trying to smooth things over. And he goes, cousin, I know you're nervous about your lunch today, but listen, on Meepos we have a saying. And then Larry gives him a look, and he goes, and I'm going to skip right to the English because I know you're in a hurry.
Eyes. Angry rolling of the eyes.
I'm going to skip right to the English for you. When you have an argument with a friend, you've got to stop right now and talk about it. Otherwise, your anger will grow and fester inside of you until you explode like a cat on a hot tin roof. Oh, it's quite a visual.
Yeah, a cat exploding on a hot tin roof. And also, cat on a hot tin roof is a reference here to the 1958 film as well as the Tennessee Williams play.
Yeah, classic play, Tennessee Williams.
Cat on a hot tin roof. But it's funny like that because it's funny that he uses that literally, like it will a cat on a hot tin roof will explode.
Eventually it will. Yes.
Gross.
But Larry is not having it and ignores Balky and goes up the stairs, and Balky's left alone again to be like, so talk when you get back. And there's nobody
He's
there.
so sad about it. He's like, I'll be right here.
He's like, I'll be right here. And Larry's not listening.
So sad. And then, so he's just standing there kind of like hurt and sad. And the elevator door opens again, and out come Jimmy, the security guard. Remember Jimmy, the security guard?
Jimmy, the security guard.
He's kind of a dummy, but he's there.
The guard locked the window.
The guard locked the window. That very same Jimmy. And he steps off, and Harriet is also there, and they're in the middle of a conversation that I think, like, these first couple lines are just to underscore the point that Jimmy is kind of an idiot.
He's not the best at his job, yeah.
And I wondered if they were setting up his character for, like, future stories with him. Anyway, he's saying, if they let me pack a gun, crooks will think twice about robbing this joint. So we know he doesn't pack a gun. He's just like a security guard. And then Harriet, always with her quips and her burns, says, if they let you pack a gun, I'd think twice about working in this joint.
Please don't give Jimmy a gun, whatever you do.
Yeah, so a little quick exchange. Also just to show that Harriet's still a wisecracking sassy woman.
And then Balky sees them and he says hi, and Jimmy goes, hi, Balky. Keep an eye on this for me, would you? I'm going to lunch. As he takes off his belt, his utility belt that has handcuffs and a nightstick and probably other important keys that you need, and hands it to Balky. And Balky's like, oh my God, can I wear it? And he's like, that's a big 10-4, buddy. And Balky's like, well, of course it is. Don't be ridiculous. Is that a yes or a no? And then the guy goes, yes, it's a yes. And he goes, but be careful of that nightstick. You might put someone's eye out. And then Jimmy leaves. Here's what we learned about Jimmy. He is really bad at his job.
He's bad. And also, why does he have to not take his belt to lunch?
I'm sure there's a policy among security guards is you don't
Doesn't
take your belt off.
Doesn't he have like a locker or a desk or something to store it in? But he doesn't have a gun, so what is it that he can't take to lunch?
I think the nightstick is awkward when you sit down. That's the thing. It jabs you.
And why? It's just so random.
He's like, hey, you want to hold
this for me? What?
Oh, Jimmy, you're going to get fired. If his boss finds out.
It does serve our story in this episode.
Yes, it does.
Unlike the Van Wissen bit, this one does move the story along. So now we have Balky with the Jimmy, the security guard's belt with a nightstick and some other things on that belt.
And then you see Larry come in from the top of the stairs. He comes down. Balky's like, close to Larry. And Larry's just completely ignoring him and walks and continues through the other door all the way on stage right. Harriet's like, what's his problem? And Balky's like, well, I think I am. Cousin Larry's angry with me. And Harriet's like, oh, I know all about that. He's like, Harriet goes, my husband has two moods. Angry and angrier.
Okay, stop here. I know this is setting up a joke for the next couple lines, but when I first heard her say my husband has two moods, angry and angrier, I felt a little scared for Harriet.
I mean, this is Carl Winslow. He's very cuddly.
I know, but we don't know Carl Winslow yet.
It makes it sound like she's married.
At this point, it's like she's in a bad situation.
She's married to Bruce Banner, and he gets mad and turns into the Hulk. It does sound a little shady, a little shaky.
Yeah, I was like, oh, this is a serious topic for another episode. But Balky is bothered. He's like, he won't even talk to me. He's giving me the cold shoulder. He won't even stand still. And Harriet offers Balky some advice about what she does when her husband is behaving that way. She says, I make him get in the car and drive until he decides to talk about it. And Balky says, does that work? And she says, well, keeps my marriage together. And we've seen all 50 states. So
that's a lot of driving and talking.
That's a lot of angry moods from Harriet's husband.
And Balky's like, look, I would do that with the driving thing, but it's kind of my fault we don't have a car right now, so I'm not going to be able to do that. And Harriet's like, look, if you want things right, you got to just make him sit down, talk to you, no matter what. And the buzzer sounds, and this is great. She's getting annoyed because the
buzzer
whole time
from someone calling upstairs. The elevator from upstairs. Yeah.
And then it buzzes again in the middle, and she's like, if you're in such a big hurry, why don't you take the window? Take a window.
Just such a dark line. She looks up at whoever, presumably upward, whoever's calling the elevator.
Impatiently.
Why don't you take a window?
Yeah.
Yikes.
I like when it gets dark on this show sometimes.
That's a dark cut. Also, we get a glimpse of the elevator floor in this shot that I had never noticed before. It's got is it carpeted in this bold floral print?
Sure, that's a fancy elevator. It makes you feel
fancy elevator
carpeted.
with an elevator operator. Harriet has delivered her advice, and it has registered in Balky. You got to do something to make him talk to me. And he goes back to his work table. He's got Jimmy's utility belt, and he sees that there are handcuffs on there, and he takes the handcuffs from the belt. He looks at the key. He's just looking at these things. And just then Larry comes out of the archives.
No, but he does that thing. Balky does that thing he does when he gets an idea. What does he do? He looks up. You see Balky look up, holding the handcuffs, getting an idea right then before Larry shows up.
Oh, I missed that. Good catch. Larry shows up, crosses the stage back to his desk, and Balky, you see him thinking, getting the idea, and he puts the key to the handcuffs in his pocket, and he goes over to Larry's desk, holding the handcuffs behind him, kind of hiding them. And he tries to talk to Larry again, and Larry cuts him off, holds up his hand. He literally talk to the hands him.
He puts his elbow on the desk, holds his hand up. Yeah.
Balky, leave me alone. That's it. And right then, Balky puts one of the cuffs on Larry's wrist and locks it. And Larry looks down at the wrist. He says, "Those are handcuffs." And then Balky puts the other handcuff on his own wrist. And he says, "They don't come off until you talk to me." And Larry is now so angry. He stands up and he says, "Take these cuffs off." And there's a little exchange. He says, "Balky, take these cuffs off. Not until you talk to me. Open these cuffs. Not until you're not angry with me anymore. Balky, if you don't take these, all right."
He starts angry and it just flips on a dime.
He's done that. We've seen him do that a few times before. "Balky, if you don't take these, all right." And then he goes, "I'm not angry anymore. I'm over it. See, I'm smiling. I'm happy. Everything's back to normal. Now, why don't you take these cuffs off?" And Balky doesn't fall for it. He says, "Why don't you give me a little credit?"
Oh, I wish he'd used the line of credit line again. That would have been hilarious. But this time
line of credit. Yeah,
he uses it properly. "Why don't you give me a little credit?" All right.
A line of credit. All right. And they argue. Again, the argument continues. "Give me the key. Talk first, key second. Where's the key?" And Larry starts searching Balky's pockets, and then that turns into a tickle fight. He starts tickling Balky. They're laughing. Balky starts tickling Larry, and Larry, in the midst of his rage, is like, "Ooh!" And they do a little twisty turn, right?
Yeah. They turn around.
Is that the scene? Yeah,
because their hands are connected, so they do a little spin around.
Yeah,
dance move.
And then Larry calls a truce. He's like, all right. "Balky, what do you want from me?" And Balky explains that he wants to be friends. He wants them to be friends again. He wants Larry to explain to him what he did wrong. And as they're saying these things, he's gesticulating with the cuffed hand, and Larry's arm is going along, flying all over the place per his gesticulations. And Larry does the same thing in reverse, throwing his hand around while he talks. He's like, "Look, you don't." And Balky's arm goes with him. And what Larry says is, "You don't loan a person's car without asking their permission." This is what he's angry about.
This is what he's so mad. I mean, he's got a point, but I think he's a little overreacting with taking
we'll talk about this after. But for now, this is what he's angry about.
Plus, it's his girlfriend. It's going to make her happy. Don't you want her to be happy?
That's what I thought. Okay, we could talk about it now. I didn't believe the anger from Larry in this episode, especially at the end of season 3. And I know this was filmed before, but by the end of season 3, when this aired, we have now seen their love in so many different ways, and they're caring for each other, that I just didn't buy that he would cold shoulder Balky so abruptly for giving his girlfriend, who he pines over and tries to impress to no extent, for loaning her his car in a time of need. You'd think that Balky actually did him a favor here, that Jennifer would be very appreciative of this.
And how much can he really love his car? He was going to buy a new one and replace it just recently. So come on.
That's right. So a lot of this just wasn't believable for me. But again, comedy, we're setting up this premise with the handcuffs. And then Balky doesn't understand why he's so mad about this. He says on Meepos, if somebody wants to borrow your ox cart, you lend them your ox cart. And here we find out Larry's response, we're not talking about an ox cart. I wouldn't care about an ox cart. We're talking about my car. I love my car. Again, not super believable because he hasn't been this crazy about his car since he was going to buy a new one, etc. And Balky apologizes. He says he'll never do it again without asking his permission. And Larry's like, cool, that's all I ask. And Balky says, are we friends again? And Larry agrees, yes, we're friends.
Yay, they're friends again.
And then Balky does that childish, like,
I love
swing.
When they swing their arms back and forth. He's like, yay.
The childish smile of, like, being pleased. And he swings the handcuffed arms back and forth. And Larry then apologizes to Balky for getting so upset and explains that he's just nervous about this lunch.
You know what's weird is right here in the middle of the episode, the initial conflict has been resolved suddenly. All of a sudden,
initial conflict. We have two conflicts in this episode, right?
We didn't know that's the unintended consequence of resolving this initial conflict, but now they're friends again. Everything's peachy keen. And
so this is almost like a prequel lesson time right here.
Yeah, it was. It was like first of
they
two lesson times.
They apologized. They resolved. Yes. Why are you mad? Why? This is what I learned. This is what I learned.
And so now Larry's like, okay, can we get these handcuffs off now, please? And Balky digs in his pocket and he gets the key and he's about to unlock them when the elevator door dings open and it's Mr. Burns. And he's calling for Appleton.
Appleton!
And Larry turns around quickly, hiding the handcuffed hand behind him. And Balky's just standing.
And Balky's like
right
glued to him, right behind him. But their cuffed hands are hidden.
He's like, yes, sir. And then Burns notices Balky. He goes, will you excuse us, Spartacus? And Balky looks confused. And he's like, I'm not really sure what I should do. And Larry's like, he's going to walk away. Don't worry. And then he turns back and he goes, Appleton?
And Larry goes to Balky. They're still cuffed. He's like, excuse us, Balky. As if it was normal. And Balky just gives him this look like, what
am I supposed to be doing?
Do? Yes. And so Larry steps to the other side of Mr. Burns. So now Burns is in the middle and their cuffed arms are behind Burns'
and then
back.
Balky just leans out.
Leans his body on a straight angle.
Not to here.
Line,
that's as far away
like
as
a 45-degree angle away from Burns.
That's as far as he can get. He's trying.
Yes. And Burns is facing Larry. So he
doesn't
presumably he thinks Balky has walked away, but he's right behind him. And so then Burns goes, I suppose you're wondering why I'm taking you to lunch. And Larry's like, yes, as a matter of fact, I was. And he says, here we learn something about how other people deal with Larry. He says, I didn't want to tell you before because, quite frankly, you're a little high strung.
Oh, you don't say.
And then Balky hears that. And from the other side of Burns, he like leans back in. He like goes, straightens up. He says, I've noticed that myself because there are times when I think this man is just going to pop. I bet. And then he looks at him. He's like, oh, I beg your pardon. I couldn't help overhearing. But I'll be right over here in case anybody needs me. And then he leans again on that 45-degree angle. And Burns just like looks at him like, what? And then he turns back to Larry and tells him that the publisher, Mr. Wainwright, had asked him the other day about reporters who are showing potential. And he said, in a very weak moment, I mentioned your name.
And Larry,
yes. Like it's like another like underhanded compliment, like a compliment and a dig at the same time. And Larry, of course, gets excited. He's like, what? You talked to the publisher about me? And Burns says that Mr. Wainwright wants to meet him, so he'll be joining them for lunch. And he says, be at the restaurant at 1. And Burns leaves. Okay. And now Larry is like super excited. He turns to, oh, no. Oops. I messed that up. Okay. Be at the restaurant at 1. And then Burns starts to walk away, but Larry's like so excited. He keeps talking to him. He's like, I'm meeting the publisher, Mr. Wainwright. I hope I get his name right. And then he does like a little.
He's like, oh, I made a rhyme. Oh.
And it's so funny. And when I heard that, all I heard was like a freestyle rhyme, a freestyle rap. I'm like, this could be
Larry's
freestyle from Larry, Mr. Wainwright. I hope I get his name right.
It's
very fun.
It's great. It's the beginning of Larry's nervous mouth diary that will continue and gets even funnier.
Also sets up his babbling.
And then and then it sets up the line, which we're going to hear a lot. Mr. Burns goes, Appleton, you're babbling. Please don't do that at lunch. And then he finally turns and leaves.
And Larry's super excited. He's, Balky, did you hear that? I'm having lunch with the publisher. And Balky's like, duh, I was right here. I heard it. And he goes, take these handcuffs off. Hurry, hurry. And he's like, needs to get to this lunch at 1. And Balky pulls out the key and he starts opening the cuffs. But of course, Larry gets impatient and doesn't let Balky do anything. He's like, I'll do it myself. He grabs the little handcuff key, and they struggle. And Balky's like, I know how to do it. I know how to do it. And Larry's like, give me the key. I'll do it. And Balky's like, cousin, I know how to do it. And then you hear the snap.
Snap.
Of course, we knew this was coming. The key broke. And then Balky says, well, now you've done it. And this is a funny line because in the argument, they're saying, Larry's saying, I'll do it. I'll do it. And Balky's saying, I know how to do it. I know how to do it. Well, now you've done it.
Now you've done it. That's the end of Act 2. Are they going to have to get a hacksaw to free themselves and cut through the chains? What's going to happen, listener, in Act 3? We'll find out. But first, you know what you could do right here. If you wanted this show to continue, if you love listening every Friday, support the show. Visit our website, danceofjoypod.com/support. There's a little buy me a coffee button there. We would love any and all donations are welcome. You'd be a producer on the show, helps the show keep going. All of it goes back in to making it through the stretch of 8 seasons.
We're going to need a lot of caffeine to get through 8 seasons.
We're plugging away 8 seasons, 1 week at a time. And it's a great journey, and you can support it. Buy us coffee. And thank you to everyone who has supported, of course.
Big thanks to our fans. Yes. Moving on, Act 3, and we get an external shot that we've seen before. It is the external of a fancy restaurant.
Oh, yeah, I remember this restaurant.
The name of the restaurant in the shot says Shea Roberts. But in fact, it is an actual restaurant. This external shot was filmed in Chicago, and the actual restaurant's name is Chez Paul.
It's the Chez Paul, the famous French Chez Paul restaurant that was in Chicago for many years.
For many years, it closed in the mid-'90s when the owner died.
The building is still there. It's something else now.
It is. Yeah. And we even see in this external shot one of Chicago's, I don't know if we call them iconic, horse-drawn carriages passing in front of this fancy French restaurant.
To prove that indeed it is Chicago. Okay, it is.
And then we cut to the inside of the restaurant, and I think, first of all, the inside of how would you describe the decor of this restaurant?
It's gaudy and tacky.
This is meant to be a fancy, upscale business luncheon in this fancy French restaurant.
Here's the interior design setup. It's green painted wood dividers with a dark green wood columns, and then bright pink tablecloths and napkins,
and like
on this
huge
dark green
floral patterns, like bold,
it is just
large floral patterns all over the walls, not like small.
But this restaurant, the last time we saw it, it was because Twinkie was taking Edwina there.
Edwina, I thought it's the same setup because remember we talked about how the booths were in the middle of the room and they were in those booths. Balky and Larry were.
The exterior shot we saw was for another episode. I think maybe it was at night.
Yeah, we've seen the the exterior in a different story. We've seen the internal when Twinkie back when we had them around. Right. When Edwina was leaving him, and they
saved their marriage when they reconciled,
and the guys were there in the booth next to them. So I think the decor was different. It was meant to be a different restaurant, but it's definitely the same.
The best thing about this set and the way it's set up with its alcoves and aisles is that it provides for some hilarious physical comedy in this whole act, which is what we're going to get.
Yes. Okay, so here we are in the inside. They're at the entryway to the far right of the screen. And the, what do we call the waiter, the receiver,
host,
the welcomer, the host, the maitre d'.
Host.
Oh, yeah, it's a French restaurant. And it's he comes over and sees Larry, who's standing in the entryway just in front of some curtains.
Very
and
close
it's just
to some
Larry.
Curtains, yes.
We only see Larry. And he introduces himself as Marcel, a very French name, Marcel. And he's got like a French hoity affect and a little mustache thing. They did like a caricature French.
You need the pencil
waiter.
mustache if you're going to be a French maitre d'. Yes.
Larry says, I'm Larry Appleton. I'm with the Burns party. And the maitre d' shakes Larry's hand, and he's still holding his hand when he says, I'll check on your table. Maybe you want to look at a menu. The maitre d' has a menu that he's offering him, and Larry, who's still holding the guy's hand with his free hand, just like looks at it. He's like, what am I supposed to do right now? And then we see another arm in like a recognizable flowy sleeve, poofy sleeve, reach out from behind the curtain, playing the part of Larry's left arm.
Yes.
And take the menu from Marcel. So that's kind of the funny intro. We know that Balky's hiding behind this curtain. And then, like, he takes it, and then the maitre d' says some stuff, and then Balky does the classic, like, I'll be your arms gag, and, like, rubs Larry's chin.
It's so
and
funny.
then the waiter walks away, and Larry, like, pulls him out from behind the curtains, and we get the exposition of the setup of this next scene. We're in luck. Mr. Burns and Mr. Wainwright aren't here yet. We'll sit at tables that are next to each other.
Yeah, great
Classic.
idea.
And if we keep our hands out of sight, no one will know we're handcuffed.
Sounds like a great plan.
Definitely gonna work.
So then as Balky is standing there, Marcel comes back, the maitre d', and he's like, Mr. Burns. And Larry's like, no, this isn't Mr. Burns. And the waiter's face is like, okay, this is weird, whatever.
Yeah.
He goes, this way, sir. And he starts to walk away. And Larry and Balky both walk with him. And Marcel turns around again, and he notices Balky is there.
Yeah.
He goes, I'll be with you in a moment. And then they're like, Larry's like, we're not together, but we'd like to sit near each other. And Balky's like, we get lonely easily. And Marcel's like,
So weird.
Of course, with a very confused look.
Yeah.
And he's like, here, they got 2 tables right here. Will this work? And he goes, yes, this is fine. And then Marcel turns away, and Larry does this quick, awesome parkour maneuver as he climbs up the booth, over the booth to the other side, so that they're each sitting on either side of this divider and this wall with
and there's
pink
like flowers.
Yes.
On the booth wall.
And nobody saw him do this, of course.
And nobody sees that their arms are like bridging over the booth wall.
And he pulls Balky's hand over. He goes, I think things are going well, don't you? And Balky's like, well, yes, I do, except I have no feeling in my thumb. And it's
oh boy,
quick joke there.
So then we have enter Mr. Wainwright and Mr. Burns, and Larry sees them and pushes Balky's arm like back over the partition and the 2 men pass Larry, and they're like, oh, Appleton, you got here early, good. And Burns introduces Larry to Wainwright, and Larry gets up to shake his hand and like pulls Balky roughly over. There's a lot. This is like a crazy physical comedy, as you can imagine. And he says, Harry's been telling me a lot about you, he says to Larry. And then he says, here's the beginning of another conflict. He said he wants to sit at another table. He says he always sits in the no smoking section because it's healthier.
And then Larry immediately goes, ordinarily I'd agree.
Oh,
stopping
boy.
them. He goes, but while I was waiting for you, I had a chance to study the air currents wafting through the room. And I noticed that the smoke is being blown directly into the no smoking area. So that while it may seem the no smoking section is healthier than the smoking section, the truth is, and then Burns cuts him off and goes, Appleton, you're babbling. And then he goes, yes, sir. Why don't we sit at another table? That's so funny, though, how quickly he comes up with an excuse.
He just came, and it was like such a ridiculous
I love it.
attempt.
He goes, wafting. I've been studying the wafts of air. Of course you have. I do love this line, too. Burns has some great lines with bug eyes.
Yeah.
Burns goes, first time in a restaurant, Appleton, pull yourself together.
Yeah.
He's freaking out, too.
In modern parlance, what he's saying is, Appleton, act like you've been here before.
Yes, act like you've been here. First time in a restaurant, Appleton. No, he's so funny.
So they go to an open table, like conveniently quite nearby, just in front of these booths, but it's an open freestanding table. And Balky climbs over the partition.
Now Balky's got to come over the other way to come on this side.
And he like pulls him over. Yeah, it's like very funny and clumsy and physical. And Balky straightens up. He's like, we handled that rather well. And so here's Larry's plan. He's going to sit at the table with Wainwright and Burns, and Balky's going to sit at the next table over.
There's a chair right there.
There's a chair right there facing
over.
toward the next table. And
yes.
They start to go, and then Balky gets really panicky and nervous.
Yes.
He says, oh, there's somebody already sitting at that table, because on the opposite side of that table, there's someone with their head behind a menu sitting at that table. And Larry doesn't care. He's like, whatever, make friends.
Make friends, he says. This is really good.
And he's going to make him sit at that table. So they go, and Larry's like babbling again. He's like,
More
oh,
mouth
sorry about
diarrhea
that.
here.
He sits down, and he's like, oh, sorry about that air current thing. It's just that I'm so nervous about meeting the publisher of the publisher of the publisher of the paper.
The publisher.
Publisher of the publisher. The publisher of the publisher. The publisher of the paper.
Oh my God. And it gets better and better and more.
And then he's like
gibberish.
so frazzled and nervous, and he like pulls out his tie. He's like, is it getting warm in here? And Burns is like, what? Are you having a stroke? He's like, well, for God's sake, sit down. And then Larry's just like, yes. And he sits. And then we see Balky like take a deep breath in, brace himself.
And he just takes a seat.
And he takes a seat and he crosses his legs again. So it's two tables. Their hands are handcuffed in the space between them. And he just goes, hello. And then the woman lowers the menu. And who is it? But none other than the Chicago Chronicles Society editor, Mrs. Van Wisser.
It's Van Wisser. And she's got a great line. She goes, young man, are you being paid to destroy me?
She recognizes him from the mail.
She goes, if you're out here in 10 seconds, I'm calling the police. At which point, Balky picks up a spoon.
Angry at him? Yeah.
She just does. She likes to eat alone. She's so mean. So Balky then picks up a spoon and drops it. He goes, oh, excuse me, I got to get that. And he goes down to the floor. And then at the meantime, Larry is being asked by R.T. Wainwright like a legit question. He's like, tell me, Larry, when did you decide to become a newspaper man? And of course, Larry wants to impress him. He's like, it's an interesting story. I started out as a photographer. And then you just hear him go, whoa, as Balky yanks him off the chair onto the floor next to him. And now they're on their hands and knees on the floor.
In the space between the two tables
in the restaurant.
And in classic sitcom world, Wainwright and Burns cannot see them or hear them.
What they're saying.
But they're right next to the table. But they're in their own private little world.
And these two just saw like Larry disappear onto the ground, and that's all they know.
And they can't see what's happening. They can't see any of this, which is, we suspend our disbelief for the sake of the story. And so they're on their hands and knees down in this secret world of theirs between these two tables. And Balky says, I've got to talk to you. Larry is just so bothered. He's like, not now. What are you doing? This and that. And Balky explains that he has to leave because Mrs. Van Wisser is going to call the police. Says she has made it very clear that she wants to dine alone. And he's like, I've got to get out of here. And Larry's like, you can't. And he says, yes, I can. She's going to call the police, which is like so frightening to him for some reason.
They've been arrested twice already.
They have,
at this point.
It should be no big deal. They both stand up. Balky is determined to leave, but Larry sits down back in the chair and starts to apologize. But Balky gets up and beelines it for the door, and Larry gets dragged, and he grabs his chair as he's being dragged.
He's like, I'll be right back. Hold on.
To the door. Again, they're arguing. Larry's like, what are you doing? And Balky says she's going to call the police. And there's a bit of parallel language, which works well in the dialogue. Balky says, cousin, if I don't get out of here right now, Mrs. Van Wisser will call the police. And Larry says, if I don't get back to that table, I'm going to lose my job. And of course, Larry's problem is more important than Balky's.
Of course it is. But Larry has a new plan. He's like, okay, just follow my lead. Let's try something else. As he takes the chair and walks back to the table with Balky next to him, and they stop and they both stand there and they go, hi, in unison together.
And it's funny because he says, just follow my lead. And then they do like a very synchronized
unison walk.
Like they do. So you see that they show that.
And they're glued to each other, they're very close to each other.
Very close.
And Bird's like, Appleton, what in the hell are you doing? And Larry's like, small world. I thought I saw my cousin Balky. And well, yeah, it was. And Bird's is like, big deal. You work together. And then Larry's like, yeah, but he is such an interesting man that if he's gone for more than a minute, your life gets boring. And Balky is just standing there next to him.
And so Larry introduces Mr. Wainwright to his cousin Balky Bartokomous, and Wainwright stands up and offers his hand to shake.
His right hand.
And he's like, it's a pleasure. Of course, because you shake with your right hand.
Yes.
And Balky just looks at his hand, Wainwright's hand, because of course Balky's right hand is the cuffed hand, and he cannot shake it with his right hand. So he just looks at it, and then he does this like awkward big swing from his left hand, like over his body, and grabs it and does an aggressive shake with his left hand to Wainwright's right hand. And Larry has to explain. He says, Balky's from Mypos, an ambidextrous island.
That is so funny to think about, an ambidextrous island. I appreciate that because I'm left-handed, and some things I can be ambidextrously.
Do you ever have an urge to do a left-handed handshake? That's just weird.
Yes, that is weird, but it could be a weird island tradition.
Yeah, it could be. In other cultures, it's totally plausible that in other cultures people shake with their left hand.
Yeah, not everybody shakes the same way. It could be whatever it is. An ambidextrous island. It's hilarious.
So that's a little fun line. And Larry's like still flustered, still trying to make this work and be cool. He's like, where are our manners? Balky, won't you join us? And then they have this play fake, and they're trying to play it cool. So it goes like this. Balky, won't you join us? Oh, I couldn't possibly. Oh, please. Oh, no, absolutely out of the question. Oh, you must. It's simply out of the question. I insist. Well, just this once.
And they pull a chair. He pulls another chair, and they sit down at the same time. But he puts
the chair right next to his, not in the open space at the table. And they sit basically like on each other's laps, very glued together. And Wainwright and Burns just like, of course, they think it's a little weird, but they carry on. And Wainwright says, just where is Mypos, Mr. Bartokomous? And Balky explains that it's in the southeastern Mediterranean. And as this bit is happening, suddenly we didn't see them order any food, but suddenly food is on the table. And there's a plate of food in front of them, Balky and Larry, who are sitting very close together, and they start eating it.
This is the funniest part of the whole
episode. As if they're one person.
Yes,
Larry
has the knife, and Balky
in his
has
right
the
hand.
fork. Yes.
Yes, and they're like feeding each other, but their hands are working in unison as if they're one person.
One's cutting and one's chewing, and Balky is feeding Larry, and you can tell Mark Linn-Baker didn't know what was going to happen, like that he was going to have to stop and eat this food because they're about to crack.
Yes.
They're about to laugh.
Both of them throughout the whole rest of this conversation are trying to not break. You can see it in their faces, and it's very enjoyable to watch because they're feeding each other and like wiping each other's faces. And then there's a moment where Mark Linn-Baker takes the water glass and tries to get Balky to drink from it, but he just holds it up and like cups Balky's chin. And Balky's just like, okay, and puts it down. It goes nowhere near his mouth. It's just like cups the chin and puts it back down. It's funny.
We learned some interesting details about Mypos because R.T. Wainwright was like, I thought I knew all the islands of the Mediterranean. I was a war correspondent there. And Balky, while he's eating, goes, Mypos is very small. During the war, it was used for target practice, which is also really funny. And then Burns notices that Balky's just eating up his plate. He's like, Bartokomous, would you like some food of your own? And Balky's like, oh, no, this is fine. So full. And Larry, more mouth diarrhea, goes, we enjoy doing things together. Did I mention we're cousins?
And then Burns has a really great burn here. He's like looking at them like, what is happening?
Oh, yes.
And he goes, were your parents cousins too? Such a good line.
I mentioned we're cousins. We're your parents' cousins too.
And this is when Larry puts the water glass up to Balky's chin.
And then another great bit of writing here as Wainwright notices what's going on. He goes, is there something wrong with your left hand, young man? To Larry. He goes, I notice you don't use it at all. And Larry goes, no. I just like to save it for emergencies. Save it because emergencies.
Emergencies.
And I was like, that is so.
That
what is an emergency? Oh, an emergency to use my left hand is so funny.
So then Larry tries to, like deflect and go on with, like still be cool. He's like, enough about me. And he's like, enough about me. And he offers Mr. Wainwright more bread. And as he holds out the basket of bread, he knocks over a water glass onto Wainwright's lap. Wainwright jumps up. He's standing now. Larry and Balky also jump up. He's trying to apologize profusely. It's a big kerfluffle. And that's when the reveal happens where Wainwright and Burns see the handcuffs.
Everyone can see it now. And Burns is like, Appleton, you better have a good explanation for this.
And Appleton hears more babbling word diary. He's like, a good explanation. You do, die boo. You bet I do. You die boo, you do die be, you die boo, you bet I do. And he's just doing gibberish, right?
And then he says, he's like, this can happen to anyone. It happened to me. It happened to him. Happened to the both of us. Has this ever happened to you? And then Balky goes, cousin, you're babbling. And then Larry just goes, oh, well, nip fetal stiffnet. And you're like, what? He says, nip
fetal stiffnet.
Fetal stiff. He's devolved into complete gibberish at this point.
We will come back
situation.
to this gibberish phrase, nip fetal stiffnet. Later in our
I was
show.
Like, what did you just say, Larry Hamilton? He's
put a
lost
pin
it.
in that. He said, "Nip fetal stiffnet."
So funny.
We'll come to that.
You do die be. You did I.
You did I boo. You died boo. You bet I do. Nip fetal stiffnet.
So funny.
I feel like we need a merch shirt that says "Nip fetal stiffnet."
Nets with Larry standing there.
Nip fetal stiffnet.
Always remember, nip fetal stiffnet.
Nip fetal stiffnet.
Never forget.
Can you say that 10 times fast?
No, don't
nip
try.
Fetal stiffnet, nip fetal stiffnet.
You're gonna hurt yourself.
All right, so then we kind of have a fade to black scene change, but the music is continuous, so I don't think it's an act ending. But we go to the next scene, which is at the Chicago Chronicle again in the basement, and the whole lunch group is returning from lunch, and they're laughing and they're having a good time. They're friends now. What we understand is it turned out okay. Everything got explained, and they still had a good, productive, friendly luncheon meeting. And as they're walking back in, Wainwright's in the middle of a story he's been telling, and we hear the end of it. He says, "What could I do? I finished the Churchill interview with my finger stuck in his brandy bottle." He's telling a story about a similar embarrassing moment with someone important.
They made a big deal out of this for no reason.
Winston Churchill, and he's got a finger stuck in his brandy bottle. It happens to the best of us. They're
like, he's, Wainwright's pretty laid back, fun guy chill, there for a big time guy there.
And they all have a big laugh, and he tells them it was a pleasure to meet them, and he offers his right hand to Larry to shake, and then he offers his left hand to Balky.
That's great.
And they do this big cross-armed handshake, a double shake, and Burns and Wainwright go to the elevator, and Burns says to Wainwright, "You were right, Harry. He's a little high-strung, but he's got potential." And they get in the elevator, and just before the door closes, Burns leans out of the elevator and says, "Appleton, I hope you realize you're very lucky." So we learn that it all worked out just fine. It was okay. They didn't have to go through any of that trouble.
Freaking out.
And Larry's like, yes, I'm lucky. I know, sir. And then they leave into the elevator, and a final, not a final, but there's like one quick joke here. Larry's like, "Well, we're lucky Mr. Wainwright has a sense of humor." And Balky says, "We're lucky we didn't have to go to the men's room."
That would have been a great scene.
And they go to the little thing in front of Larry's desk and sit down on it, still handcuffed. They sit side to side on top of this filing cabinet. And then...
Now it's lesson time 2.
Lesson time 2. We don't... This is like them recapping what happened. Balky says... none of this... Balky realizes that none of this would have happened if, and he's talking to Larry. Larry cuts him off. Of course he does. He interrupts. He says, "I know exactly what you're going to say." And Balky tries again. "None of this would have happened." And Larry says, "I know you're going to say that none of this would have happened if I had talked to you when I was angry." And here's where the lesson time music starts right at this point. And Larry says, "I was wrong and I'm sorry." And Balky just looks at him. He says, "That's very nice, but that isn't actually what I was going to say." What I was going to say is none of this would have happened if I had just been patient and waited for you to find a time to talk to me. I was just trying to follow my Meposian proverb.
And Larry goes, "Well, Balky, nobody enjoys a good Meposian proverb more than I do, but life is a little more complicated in America. You might have to adjust your proverbs." And then Balky has this great line. He goes, "I guess they could do some fine tuning." He goes, "On Mepos, when we say we have to talk right now, it's not so much a problem because there's really nothing else to do."
He's
got a point. You can just talk now. What are you doing? Nothing.
So this is it. They have apologized. They have each learned a thing.
They've seen each other's perspectives or like each other's sides,
And it's the classic in America. We do it this way. On Mepos, we do it this way. And they've learned and they've apologized. They've made up. They had a good lunch. Enter Harriet Winslow from the elevator. She asks them how lunch was, and she looks at them and sees the handcuffs, and she says, "What's going on here?" She says, "You two guys look like Tony Curtis and Sidney Poitier." Well, actually, you both look like Tony Curtis, which is funny because Tony Curtis is the white man of this pair. So they both look like Tony Curtis. And there's a little laugh there. And Larry says, "It's a long story. And have you seen Jimmy? We need to get another key for these handcuffs." And Harry's like, "Sure I have. He went to the hospital. His wife is having a baby." And for a split moment, Balky and Larry are so happy about this. They're like, oh. And then they look at their handcuffs and they're like, oh, they have to wait. And that's the end of the show. Roll credits.
That last
And we
joke,
never find out how they get out of the handcuffs.
presumably they are still in handcuffs to
They are
this
still
day.
cuffed when the credits roll.
Before we get into this episode, listener, make sure you visit our TeePublic shop so you can get some Dance of Joy swag, a cool niche podcast t-shirt to show all your friends. danceofjoypod.com/shop. There's tons of accessories and other items, mugs, face masks, hoodies, pillows, tote bags, all with the lovely logo. Lots of colors, lots of fun stuff. Send us a photo if you get something.
Please do. And just a reminder about this last joke that we ended on. Tony Curtis and Sidney Poitier, we mentioned at the beginning, were the stars of that 1958 film, The Defiant Ones.
Which is the same plot of kind of what happens here.
Yes. They play escaped convicts who are chained together and have to learn to get along to avoid being captured. Kind of the same. They're stuck together. Two unlikely characters stuck together. And also the inspiration for the title of this show, The Defiant Guys.
I just thought that was a weird reference because you think a lot of people, they figured a lot of people knew this movie from 1958.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe
it totally went over my head. I did not know. And I was like, I don't understand this title.
Like usually when they reference a movie in this show, it's like more recent and it was in the cultural conversation at the time, but this one,
I'm sure it's a classic movie and it's a big movie, but it's like it's very specific. Yeah, I don't know. It's probably a classic one. So yeah, the title threw me the whole way through until I was like, Tony Curtis. I had to look up Tony Curtis. I was like, what movie is Tony Curtis and Sidney Poitier in? What is she talking about?
And I like this line where she's like, "You look like Tony Curtis and Sidney Poitier." Well, actually, you both look like Tony Curtis.
Yeah. That would make sense. Outside of like the random Van Wisser character, it's a fun, good physical episode with a lot of good lines, a lot of gags, and kind of like, again, two setups. It's weird.
Yeah, it seemed like two conflicts, one after another, two setups, but I get it. I get like that being handcuffed together. Look, being handcuffed together is funny. Okay.
Yes,
it's always funny. Handcuffs are funny.
Yes.
This is another like premise that gets used by many, many sitcoms and stories. You're stuck together. What are you going to do during a big, like momentous event or whatever? And you got to make it work. But I think the backstory that they wrote around this to get them into this situation for me forced. Just like wasn't very believable.
Yeah.
And I do understand that some of that is maybe because this was filmed earlier and it might have been more believable earlier in the season. But now where we are in what we know about these characters and their relationship by the end of season 3, it wasn't believable. Like, I think Larry would have been overjoyed. Like, oh my God, you did me a solid by loaning my beautiful girlfriend who I want to be mine forever and ever this car and helping her out. I appreciate that, to me, it felt like Balky did him a favor to win Jennifer's favor, to win Jennifer's like appreciation or whatever. So I didn't buy that he would be that mad as to cold shoulder him for like running out of not buying floss or using his pen or giving away his car. Like I just didn't buy it. So that felt a little off to me, but yeah, again, like the gags were funny, the physical comedy was funny. So the Cretan wordplay I especially appreciated.
That was good too.
Again, the whole episode, I'm like, what is the point of Mrs. Van Wisser?
So let's talk about some of these cameos. I think that Susan French it was a get for them, and they were like, God, we would love Susan French to be anything.
We have to give her a line somehow. Yeah, that's probably what it was.
They could have gave her something better to do. I did. I mean, I thought the one line
I mean, she does play like an annoyed, what did we call her? Like a hoity, annoyed,
really well.
upper class woman very well.
I like the line where she's like, "Are you being paid to destroy me?" It's kind of funny.
Both of her two appearances like serve a little purpose. No, the second one serves a purpose to like why Balky has to leave, or this conflict between Balky and Larry in the actual restaurant. But anyway, it was forced. It was a little forced. Yeah.
Let's talk about Burns and Wainwright. I thought Eugene Roche playing Mr. Burns, I thought he was super funny this episode, and he always is with his facial expressions and his eyes and his movement. And this is the last time we are going to see Mr. Burns as Eugene Roche, as R.T. Wainwright, played by F.J. O'Neill, is now going to take over as the boss character moving forward, I believe. But
until the end.
So we lost
close to the end. We
lost Twinkasetti, and now we've lost Burns.
But we have Wainwright.
We got Gorpley still hanging around. No, you know what's funny? No, the girls aren't in this one. No Jennifer or Marianne.
Girls, no, because Jennifer went to the airport somewhere in Larry's car.
Right. And Marianne probably drove her, because how's the car getting back? I don't know.
Yeah,
they're both flight attendants.
Yeah,
but I'll miss Mr. Burns. He was hilarious.
Yeah, he was pretty funny. He had that like annoyed look, and he was like big and burly. It was classic funny curmudgeonly boss character. What else did you think about this episode? What did you think? Was it believable to you?
Yeah, it was kind of a stretch, but again, suspension of disbelief always when you're watching this show, exactly. And it doesn't have to make sense.
Yeah.
But
I feel like the writing process was like, oh, remember in this classic movie when these two guys were handcuffed together, chained together? Like,
let's do that.
Let's do handcuffs. And they were like, handcuffs. And then how do we make it happen? And they went like, they wrote around this idea about handcuffs. And some of it was a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. It's whatever.
It's fine. It was good. It was all right. I didn't hate it. It was just an okay episode, but I laughed. I had out loud laughing moments.
Yeah, not a lot of Balkyisms, though, in this one.
Not a whole lot, yeah. So we have him saying, I have a stinking feeling instead of a sinking feeling, which still works.
Yeah.
And this line about Cousin Larry got up this morning with a look on his face that would have curdled your hair. I don't know what the hair one is. I feel like he's mixing two things, and I don't know what the hair one is.
A lot of repetition. Don't be ridiculous. Said 3 times.
3 times.
Of course I have. Don't be ridiculous.
That's a record. Also, the babbling bit came back 3 times.
Yes.
Babbleton,
and we have
babbling.
2 opopos. We have Larry babbling. And
oh, my God.
There's 2 opopos, at least.
Yeah.
And then we have our classic Larry and Balky saying together, Hi, after a ridiculous moment. We don't see Dimitri Sheep at all.
No Dimitri appearance in this one.
But thankfully, we have
what our buddy on Instagram has.
Our buddy Dimitri Sheep on Instagram. Please go to Instagram and follow Dimitri Sheep, Dimitri Sheep, all one word. Dimitri, the stuffed sheep, is doing a themed image post per every episode that we review. And they are brilliant. And some extras that are not themed per episode.
This one's great.
We are looking at the Defiant Guys post, and the location is marked as the no smoking section.
The no smoking section. A lot of great details in this photo.
A lot of details in this. So we have Dimitri Sheep at a dinner table with a fancy tablecloth. So we're in the no smoking section, presumably of a fancy restaurant. And Dimitri Sheep is handcuffed to a smaller stuffed sheep.
We've seen this sheep before in some of the earlier posts.
So Dimitri Sheep's front right paw is handcuffed to a sheep, and on the front left leg is a bit of dental floss tied around it
as a reminder. Yes, that's great.
And the floss pack itself is lying there on the table right in front. Also lying on the table is a pen and a car key, meaning Larry's lucky pen and Larry's car key. Then straight in front of Dimitri and this other baby sheep is a bowl of cereal.
Sugar Oatsies.
Sugar Oatsies. But also in the cereal is a fork and a knife.
Yeah, because
that's how they were eating.
Yeah. How they were eating at the restaurant.
That's very clever.
2 cups of tea there.
and 2 cups of tea, which I don't think is a reference to anything, but is just there. Did we have any tea or coffee references?
No, he was dipping in the last episode, he was dipping the cookie.
Episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what the tea, I don't know if there's a significance to the coffee or tea, but there's 2 of them. Anyway, this is very clever. The knife and fork, the floss tied around, all of this is very clever.
Details,
It's a great,
well done,
it's a great
again.
Dimitri Sheep
As
post.
always.
Well done, Dimitri the Sheep. So everyone go and check out that Instagram account. We love it. And now it's time for the segment of our show that we call Perfect Strangers Today, or PS Today, in which we discuss if this story were to happen, were to take place today, how would things be different in this episode? What are your thoughts, Imran?
Well, you put in the notes the instant thought that I had was like you could look up videos on YouTube, but how to unlock.
If you were stuck, in the second conflict of the show, oh shoot, I am handcuffed to someone and I have an important meeting coming up.
How to lock,
today,
pick, open handcuffs. That's the first thing I would do. Absolutely.
Alternate ways.
Yes.
The key broke in the lock. What do I do? How do I get these
What
cuffs?
can I use to cut through the chains?
Right.
Is there some trick that cops use to get these off when they lose their keys? All of that you would find on the internet, YouTube, and possibly Reddit threads, subreddit threads. Absolutely.
The next thing I thought is, so Larry's lucky pen in this episode, not in the last time we heard about the lucky pen, but in this episode, his lucky pen is a fountain pen, which causes some problem. It leaks. Do people still use fountain pens?
You know,
I guess they do. Some people do.
Pen snobs absolutely still use fountain pens. Also for drawing, if you're still inking like comic books, you're going to use a quill pen that you dip in India ink. But I love pens. I love a nice pen. I love a nice ink pen and a nice fountain pen.
You're an artist. You're a drawer.
There's nothing like a nice fountain pen of the way the ink flows on a nice piece of paper.
Okay, so that part could still hold up today.
Yeah, it's like a little hipstery, I think, the fountain pens, maybe. I don't know.
Also, I think, we've been talking about this like weak story premise, the weak setup. And I think that would have to change because it wouldn't hold up, because if Jennifer was in a bind and needed to get to the airport, everyone would have cell phones, smartphones. She could just ask Larry directly, call him up.
Can I borrow your
car? It would
car?
not have to be done without his knowledge. To borrow the car, or she could even take an Uber or Lyft or a taxi. Again, Jennifer could take a taxi to the airport, but or a bus or whatever. And the other thing I thought was there's no more smoking sections in restaurants, so we would have to have another reason why Wainwright wants to sit at a different table.
Remember when you could smoke in restaurants and bars and how ridiculous it was, where there was a corner that was like, this is the smoking section, and the smoke is just coming over everywhere.
And it's right next to the non-smoking section.
I was like, what is the point of this? Just let people smoke wherever they want. It's wild.
I do not, in fact, remember that in America, but I have been in other countries where at times when that still existed and have experienced that in other countries. And I thought it was strange because the smoking section was like right next to you.
You were able to smoke in movie theaters while the movie was playing. Think about
wild.
That. Isn't that
Airplanes.
strange? Airplanes. In an enclosed bubble in the air, you could just fill it with tobacco smoke if you wanted to.
Airplanes, movie theaters. That's wild. Oh, maternity ward waiting rooms.
No, remember, next to every elevator, there used to be built-in ashtrays in the wall.
That's right.
I was like, do people just hang out and wait for the elevator to smoke cigarettes?
Like pedestal ashtrays.
Yeah, everywhere in the hallway, because you would just go in the hallway, smoke a cigarette, no problem, come back in. So strange.
I actually, yeah, I've lived and worked in other countries at times when that was still a thing, where there was like a smoking room in the office where people would go to smoke, or that's wild.
That's different. Yeah. So that wouldn't be a concern.
So
mostly.
I think if this was getting remade today, like, yes, handcuffs is still a very funny thing, right? The problem is still funny. You could still do this idea.
Yeah.
You would have to change some of the backstory, modernize some of the setups, and make it make more sense. But yeah. The jokes in it would hold up, and the hilarity of the handcuff situation would hold up. Okay, time for our listener shout outs and our listeners' thoughts on this episode. And oh boy, was there some interesting conversations happening about this episode. Let's go through it. First of all, we have some highlights from cousin Pam Hitchcock, who did enjoy this episode. And she writes, this is an episode that's a perfect blend of dialogue, acting, chemistry, and physical comedy. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it was like just an okay episode. It was still entertaining. They're all still entertaining, even the okay ones. But thank you for that comment, Cousin Pam. And she also writes, I'm just going to pretend I heard food ordered because the scene where Balky and Larry were eating was so hilarious. I enjoyed watching Bronson Pinchot try not to laugh. And I believe that was a genuine snort of laughter when Larry said, nip fetal stipnet.
Nip fetal stipnet.
Did Mark Lynn Baker make that up on the spot? Bronson's reaction made it seem so. So yeah, that was very enjoyable to watch. She also wonders, why did Jimmy leave his utility belt in Balky's care?
He's an
idiot. Is there a reason why he couldn't wear it?
Because Jimmy is bad at his job and he's an idiot.
Yeah,
that's why.
He just leaves his stuff with anyone. And also, we needed Balky to acquire handcuffs for some reason.
We got to get him the handcuffs.
And she writes, for someone who has as many lucky items as Larry does, it's ironic that the luck he has is bad luck. Very good point.
Bad luck items.
Okay, next we have a lot of really great comments from Cousin Evelyn Behar, and I'm just going to highlight one of them, which is about the line where Larry explains that Mypos is an ambidextrous island.
What does that mean?
And she says, this might be my favorite Mypos tidbit thus far. And then Cousin Evelyn has done some research and watched some interviews, it seems, on the actors in this show. And she tells us that Bronson Pinchot, on purpose, intentionally made Balky left-handed.
Whoa.
Bronson Pinchot himself is right-handed, but he made Balky a left-handed character. Okay, and here's a bit of research that, thank you very much, Cousin Evelyn, for letting us know this. She says this was filmed during an era in which people took great interest in the idea that people are either left-brained or right-brained, with the implication that being that left-brained people who are right-handed are more logical and analytical, whereas right-brained people who are left-handed are more creative and intuitive. So she thinks that because Balky is kind of wacky, Bronson Pinchot made him left-handed.
He would be left-handed. Yeah.
And she also lets us know that theory is not really supported by evidence, but back then it was something that a lot of people believed. It was conventional wisdom. And so Balky is our lefty, loosey-goosey, wacky immigrant in the show.
I remember we talked about this when they were working at the burger joint and he was writing and we noticed he was writing with his left hand.
Now, you are left-handed. What do you think? And Evelyn says this theory isn't supported by evidence, but what do you think as a left-handed person? I mean, with us, it's true. I'm right-handed and I've been the more left-brained person, and you've always been super creative and artsy and crafty, and you're left-handed.
I always thought left-handed people were more creative. Barack Obama is left-handed. There's a lot of famous left-handed people. Ned Flanders opened a store.
I was just going to say.
The Leftorium, which is very good for, promoting left-handedness in the community. But
we're going to have to do some research. Apparently, this is just a whack theory that isn't really true.
It's not. There's books. I read a book about left brain, right brain creativity and stuff and how it's all wired. That's how I thought it worked. I didn't know that it wasn't supported by any actual evidence.
I'm no rocket surgeon, but maybe it's true. Maybe it's not true.
I'm no rocket scientist. This isn't brain surgery. Science.
This isn't brain science.
Rocket surgery. This
I'm
isn't
no
rocket surgery.
Surgeon.
Yeah.
Yeah. But thank you for this input, Cousin Evelyn. Okay. And next, we actually in the group had a lengthy exchange between Cousin Evelyn and Cousin Pam, and they were trying to pinpoint any kind of meaning or theory behind when Larry says nip fetal stipnet. Is there some meaning to this gibberish phrase, nip fetal stipnet? Was it an inside joke? Was it a nod to something, a callback? And if you want to check out the whole conversation, you got to join our group and go check out the conversation. It's quite lengthy, but at the end of this conversation between Evelyn and Pam, Cousin Evelyn offers a full-on interpretation that I think I'm just going to read it. It's a little bit long, but it's an interesting interpretation. Who knows if it's right or wrong, but let's give it some space. So she writes, a fiscal interpretation of the Defiant Guys, a Cousin Pam and Cousin Evelyn collaboration. That's the title. And it goes like this. The episode starts with the cereal for which Balky bought stock. So we're already opening with a reminder of financial institutions. Then many moments focus on the contrast between the haves and the have-nots. For example, we have Mrs. Van Wissel reminding Balky that she is the most important society editor in town, calling him you, mailboy, and cretin, and telling him to spare her the details of his petty little life. We also have the two newspaper executives out to lunch with the two employees much lower on the ladder, who incidentally are sharing a plate of food and who find themselves on the floor while the three higher-ranking executives remain seated at tables above them. So there's an ongoing contrast between the wealthy and the non-wealthy, and the little guy, Larry, is of course trying to climb the ladder. During the restaurant scene, Larry offers Mr. Wainwright more bread, which might symbolize the rich getting richer. Interesting. And it leads to a spilling of water, which might symbolize the ramifications of greed.
Okay.
The handcuffs, meanwhile, could symbolize being a slave to power and wealth and climbing social ladders at the expense of feeling close to and united with loved ones. The scene ends with Larry saying, "Nip, fetal, stip, net." And thanks to Cousin Pam, we know that nip, stip, and net are all financial terms. And fetal means either spending time in aimless activity or fiddle, as in fiddling with the books from Latin. And there you have it, our collaborative Perfect Strangers, pure insanity. This went too far even for us. We are probably totally wrong, but it was a fun collaboration anyway.
What are we talking about?
Wow.
Exactly.
Listen, I love the enthusium and the digging
I love the
in,
level of detail.
But I just think Marklin Baker made up some words and it was just random. He just came up with some silly words that sound funny.
So there you go. It's up to you, listeners, to decide which interpretation you want to believe. But in any case, in either interpretation, Nip Fetal Stipnet is just funny and deserves to be on a t-shirt.
I think I got to make it a t-shirt. Absolutely.
Nip Fetal Stipnet. We also have some comments from Cousin John. Adama, also a regular in our group. He points out that 3 of the actors in this show were also on episodes of Moonlighting, apart from Marklin Baker, who was on Moonlighting. The woman who played Mrs. Van Wissel, the security guard, and Mr. Wainwright have all been on episodes of Moonlighting.
It's ABC. They're all on the payroll. So, they
rotated them around shows.
Throw them over there. You need somebody for this thing. Put this guy there.
And he also thinks it's ridiculous that Larry has all these lucky items when Larry was the one who was mocking the psychic in a previous episode.
The horn blows at midnight.
And I feel like Cousin John knows a thing or two about handcuffs. Why is that, Cousin John? But he writes a shim, which I had to look up what it is. It's like a little piece of metal or whatever.
Yeah.
A shim, or because it's TV, any other security guard could have easily opened those handcuffs.
Oh, yeah. Is Jimmy the only security guard working in the building?
In the whole building?
I don't think they've hired anybody else. It's all... That building is doomed. Jimmy's an idiot.
Right. And finally, Cousin John writes, the lesson they each learn is true and really relevant to the story. Nicely done. It's a very basic plot idea that's elevated by clever writing and smart choices throughout. It may not be an amazing episode, but it would be a good introduction to any new watcher.
I agree. It is one of those that clearly shows the cousins' characters and what the show is about and has a little bit of everything. And again, yes, we've seen this again. It's a basic setup that is made funnier by the performers.
Right.
In the moment. So John always nails it. He always nails the essence of the episode.
Yes, keep them coming.
He's
keep up
John.
The summaries of the episodes, John. Thank you. So thank you to all our listeners. If you are new to our show, please join the Facebook group again. Please join in these very interesting conversations about little parts of the show.
Yes, and if you are new, make sure you subscribe because next week we get to meet another member of the Appleton family.
We've met
Sister Elaine, who's a pistol. And Elaine's a pistol. Now we're gonna meet cousin Billy, Balky's cousin Billy, Larry's brother Billy. That he's talks about.
We've heard about Billy before, but we haven't met him yet.
And Larry has a thing about his brother Billy, and you're gonna find out what it is. Meet some more Appletons next week. In the meantime, you can visit our website, danceofjoypod.com. for links to everything, how to get in touch, how to listen to the show, how to subscribe, and all the best podcast apps, how to leave a rating and review. There's a little microphone icon in the lower right-hand corner. You can click it, leave a voicemail, or you can send us typewritten mail delivered electronically to our email, danceofjoypod@gmail.com. But, sister, what's the most important thing the listener should do?
Never yawn in the shower.
Oh, why? What happens? You might drown. Oh, that's a good point. Don't do that. That's dangerous. Also, share the show with a perfect stranger's friend.
Share the show with a friend. Share our social media accounts with a friend. Click like, click subscribe. Share Perfect Strangers with a friend. Share these 22 minutes of joy with everyone you know. Everyone needs it right now. Everyone needs this right now.
Let's get this show viral and popular again because, yes, this is what the world needs now is love and Balky and Larry. Thanks for listening to Dance of Joy, and now we are all so happy.
Now we are so happy we do the dance of joy. Hey, 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 hey.